under the Oshodi Bridge, where traffic roared, an old woman in a tattered brown Ankara wrapper lay still on the sidewalk. People walked around her like she was a rock on the road. Amara, thin and small, simple dress, medium brown complexion, pushed through the crowd. She knelt by the woman. "Mama, can you hear me?" Her voice shook, but it was clear. She touched the woman's forehead. It was hot. "Somebody help!" Amara called. A man selling bottled water shook his head. "Leave her," he muttered. Amara ignored him. She put one arm under the woman's shoulders and one under her legs, trying to lift. The woman was heavy, and Amara's arms trembled. Across the service lane, a black Bentley sat by the curb. A tall man, Johnson, dark complexion, expensive navy blue kaftan and red cap, stood by the car. He watched the scene with eyes that carried both power and pain. He saw the small girl fail, then take a breath and try a third time. He crossed the road. "Let me help," he said, kneeling beside Amara. Amara did not look up. She only said, "Please, she will die if we waste time." Together, they lifted the woman. Amara's cheek pressed against the woman's gray hair. A thin whisper slipped from the woman's lips, so soft that only Amara heard it. "See, I lud." Johnson opened the back door of the Bentley and helped them in. "Drive," he told his driver, voice firm. "Closest hospital now." Inside the car, Amara held the woman's wrist. "She's burning," Amara said, her eyes wet. Johnson stared at the woman's face, studying the high cheekbone and the small scar by the left eyebrow. His hand began to shake. "Stop the car," he said. They pulled to the side of the road. Johnson reached for the woman's chin and gently turned her face to the light. He saw the scar, the leaf earring, the small curve of her lip. "Mama," he whispered. Amara looked up confused. "Sir." Johnson's voice broke open. She's my mother." The words hit the air like a bell. Amara stared from the powerful man to the weak woman in her arms. "Your mother?" she asked. Johnson nodded once, his eyes wet. "Her name is Madame Sandra. She disappeared months ago." They reached the hospital. 2 nurses and a doctor rushed out with a stretcher. Amara did not let go until hands took the woman gently from her arms. In the brighter, Amara stood small in the white room. Johnson stood on the other side, steady and still. "Mama Sandra," Amara said, her voice shaking. "It's me. You are safe. Your son is here. He is right here." The woman's eyelids fluttered. "She hears you," Johnson said, hope breaking through his fear. "My name is Amara. I don't have much, but I have 2 hands. I used them today for you." The doctor let out a breath. "Better," he said. "Not safe yet, but better." Johnson looked at Amara properly now. "What is your name again?" he asked. "Amara," she said. "It means grace." "It fits," he murmured. A woman in a gray suit, Johnson's personal assistant, hurried down the corridor. "Sir," she gasped. "Someone just called the front desk, claiming that if Madame Sandra survives, they will come back to finish what they started." Johnson's face turned to stone. The lead doctor came out, sweat shining on his forehead. "She's alive," the doctor said, voice trembling. "But someone injected her with a slow-acting poison." Johnson froze. "Poison," he repeated. Amara pressed a hand to her mouth. "Sir, if you didn't come when you did." Johnson turned to her, his voice low but firm. "No, if you didn't stop to help her, she would have died under that bridge alone." He turned to his bodyguard. "Increase the security at this hospital. No one goes near her room unless I approve it." Amara looked up at him, fear creeping into her chest. "Why would anyone want to harm your mother?" Johnson stared at the floor, his eyes dark and heavy. "Because she knows things. Things some people would kill to hide." Night came quietly over the hospital. The corridors were quieter now. Amara sat on a plastic chair outside the ICU, her hands folded tightly. Every sound made her flinch. Johnson walked out of his mother's room, his face tired but calm. He handed Amara a bottle of water. "You should drink," he said. She took it with a small smile. "Thank you, sir." He sat beside her. "I was 10 when my father died. My mother raised me alone," he said quietly. I promised her she'd never have to work again. Amara listened silently. She left home for church and never came back. We searched everywhere. I thought she was dead. Amara looked at him, her eyes soft. Maybe someone took her. That's what I'm starting to think, Johnson nodded slowly. Do you believe in destiny, sir? Amara asked. I used to now. Maybe I'm starting to again. Just then, a nurse came out of the ICU. She's awake, she said. Johnson and Amara both stood at once. Can we see her? Johnson asked. The nurse nodded. Only for a few minutes. Inside the ICU, the room was bright but peaceful. On the bed lay Madame Sandra, weak but alive, her eyes half open. When Johnson stepped closer, her eyes widened, tears welling up. My son, she whispered, her voice faint. Johnson took her hand and pressed it to his cheek. Mama, I thought I lost you. Madame Sandra smiled weakly. You didn't lose me. You just stopped looking in the right place. Madame Sandra turned her gaze toward Amara, who stood quietly at the corner. Is she the one? Johnson nodded. Yes, Mama. She found you under the bridge. She carried you herself. Madame Sandra reached out her frail hand and touched Amara's face. Bless you, she whispered. You brought me back when I was already gone. But before the warmth could settle, the heart monitor beside the bed beeped sharply. Once, twice, then it began to rise and fall erratically. Doctor, the nurse shouted. She's reacting to something. Blood pressure dropping fast. A team of doctors rushed in. Amara backed up against the wall, fear written all over her face. The chief doctor barked an order. Call security now. Someone replaced her foreline. A nurse pulled out a syringe. This isn't from our supply, she said. It's been tampered with. Madame Sandra's lips moved faintly. Don't trust. Then her eyes rolled back. The doctor's voice cut through the chaos. We're losing her again. Outside, footsteps ran through the corridor. The hospital alarm screamed. Code blue. Code blue in ICU. Johnson stood frozen by the doorway. Amara grabbed his arm. Sir, please, you'll only make it worse. Minutes passed like hours and then silence. The lead doctor came out. She's stable again, he said, trembling. We found a second dose of the toxin. Someone switched her line while she was sedated. Johnson's jaw tightened. I want every camera in this hospital reviewed. Now. We already started, said his security chief, walking briskly toward him. We found something on the CCTV from 20 minutes ago. The man handed Johnson a tablet. On the screen was grainy footage. A figure in a nurse's uniform entering Madame Sandra's room. Amara gasped. That's not one of the hospital nurses, she whispered. The woman in the footage wore a nurse's uniform, but her eyes were sharp, cold, and familiar. Johnson zoomed in. Wait, he said, his voice hardening. I've seen her before. He paused, memories flashing through his mind. The woman who vanished after stealing millions from the company's charity arm. Her name had been Patience. Find her, Johnson said through clenched teeth. Search every ward, every exit, every car. The guards moved instantly. Hours later, the hospital was on lockdown. The tense, quiet atmosphere of a corporate meeting, highlighting Amara's small but vital role. Hours later, the hospital lockdown was complete, but Patience had vanished. The hallways were silent, patrolled by Johnson's private security detail. Johnson, still in the navy blue kaftan, his face now etched with cold determination, led Amara to a secluded waiting room. He placed a tablet on the small, polished table. On the screen was grainy footage from a street camera near the Oshodi Bridge. You said you saw a man, Johnson stated, his voice low and firm, near a black SUV. Tell me everything you remember about him. Amara stared at the screen, concentrating deeply. He was standing far away near a black SUV, she repeated. He had dark glasses on, so I couldn't see his eyes. He wasn't waiting for a bus. He kept looking at the woman, at Mama Sandra. The glasses are a problem, Johnson said, his jaw tight. But the car model? Amara closed her eyes for a second, accessing her photographic memory. It was a large, dark SUV. Not a Bentley, but expensive. The brake light on the driver's side was flickering, and it had a small round dent near the back wheel well. Johnson looked up sharply, stunned by the specificity. That was the kind of detail only a focused, non-distracted observer would notice. He spoke into his secure phone. Run a search. Black luxury SUVs, Lagos area, registered private plates, driver's side brake light intermittently failing, recent body damage near the rear axle. He looked back at Amara. You said my mother disappeared after leaving for church. She knows something critical about patience. Tell me what she knows. Mama Sandra didn't leave home to harm herself, Johnson began, his voice softening slightly as he spoke of his mother. She was investigating something. Years ago, Patience was a rising star in my company's charity arm. But she was bleeding it dry. Mama Sandra, she started that charity. She noticed the discrepancies. Johnson leaned forward. Mama didn't just notice the missing funds. She saw Patience meeting with the very criminals whose actions the charity was supposed to counteract. She gathered evidence, but before she could give it to me, Patience realized she was exposed. Patience stole the final funds and vanished. So when Mama Sandra found herself in danger, she couldn't come home, Amara whispered. She couldn't call you because she knew Patience was still watching, still trying to silence the evidence. Johnson nodded. She went into hiding, choosing the chaos of the bridge over the danger of the penthouse. She didn't want the truth to die with her. A security officer entered the room. Sir, we have a partial hit on the vehicle description. A dark SUV matching the description was seen leaving the hospital perimeter immediately after the second code blue alarm. Patience, Johnson hissed. She's watching this hospital, waiting for Mama to crash. And the driver of the SUV? Marest. He was the lookout at the bridge. He delivered her to the street and has been monitoring her. Johnson made a decision. He could not risk Amara's safety by keeping her in the hospital. He had to keep the witness close. Later that evening, Amara stepped into a world she never knew existed. Johnson's penthouse apartment, a serene tower of glass and steel overlooking the entire glowing city. She was overwhelmed, but held her composure. She wore a simple, clean lounge outfit, freshly purchased, in place of her stained dress. This is safer, Johnson stated simply, leading her to a state-of-the-art office. We work here. Your memory is our key witness. I need you focused and secure. He sat her down in front of a giant monitor displaying hours of surveillance footage from the area around the bridge. We need to identify the driver of that SUV. No stone unturned. Amara, now surrounded by luxury and power, felt a strange sense of belonging. She was no longer pushing a cart or cleaning up dust. She was solving a multi-million naira corruption case. They worked through the night, fueling themselves with coffee and silent determination. Johnson, the billionaire CEO, listened intently as Amara, the girl who once dreamed of affording a good book, meticulously pointed out details. A reflection of a specific watch on the SUV's window, the way the man held his coffee cup. Just as the first light of morning touched the glass walls, Amara let out a small, sharp gasp. Wait, go back 10 minutes. Just before the driver got in the car. Johnson rewound the footage. The man in the dark glasses approached a small kiosk to buy a drink. For a split second as he raised the cup, the dark glasses slipped down his nose. The footage was grainy, but his face was visible. There! Amara exclaimed. I saw him. That man, he worked at my old school. He was a janitor there for a few months last year. Everyone called him Bode. He suddenly quit after a small computer went missing from the principal's office. Johnson froze, looking at Amara's identification, then at the image. The pattern was clear. Patience was hiring people no one would suspect. The invisible people, the cleaners, the janitors, the people who were ignored. He snatched the phone. Find every public record on a man named Bode, linked to any former employees of my company, especially Patience. Use the name and the charity investigation. I want him located now. He looked at Amara, his expression a mixture of awe and dawning respect. You didn't just save my mother, Amara. You are exposing the entire conspiracy. Amara nodded, her small frame radiating a quiet strength. The hunt was on, and she was leading the chase. The sterile luxury of the penthouse contrasts with the raw emotions of betrayal and investigation. Johnson, dark complexion, commanding presence, tailored suit, stood before the giant monitor, his attention fixed on the image of the man Amara had identified. Bode, the janitor turned lookout. Amara, medium brown complexion, focused, wearing simple, clean trousers and a shirt, sat nearby, her small frame radiating a quiet strength that belied the danger they faced. Bode worked for me briefly years ago, Johnson said, pacing slowly. A low-level contract cleaner at one of the subsidiaries. Invisible. Just like Patience. The security chief's voice crackled through the comms. Sir, we located him. He's at a remote safe house in the Ikoyi area. The SUV is there. Do not engage, Johnson ordered. We need him alive, and we need to know who he reports to. Set up a perimeter and wait for my command. Johnson turned to Amara. Bode won't talk easily. He's been bought. We need to break his confidence. We need to put him back under the Oshodi Bridge. Hours later, the team executed the plan. Bode was lured out of the safe house, convinced he was going to meet Patience for his next payment. Instead, he found himself surrounded, hooded, and delivered directly to the hospital's basement security room. When the hood was pulled off, Bode's eyes, full of arrogance moments before, were wide with panic. He was forced into a steel chair. Johnson stood over him, immense and cold. You were paid to watch my mother under the bridge, Bode. Who paid you? Bode, dark complexion, simple, sweaty clothes, spat on the floor. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a driver. I work for a transport company. We found the SUV with the dented fender and the flickering brake light, Amara said, her voice clear and cutting, stepping into the light. I saw you at the bridge. I remember your face. Bode's eyes darted to Amara, his panic increasing. He hadn't expected the girl he dismissed as a pest to be sitting opposite him in a hospital security room, backed by a billionaire. You don't just work for Patience, Bode. You work for the person who poisoned my mother, Johnson stated, leaning close. And Patience herself works for someone else. You're disposable. The moment you fail, you die. Who is protecting Patience? Bode remained silent, shaking his head stubbornly. Amara then did the unexpected. She pulled out her phone and played a short voice note. It was the sound of a woman whimpering, followed by Madame Sandra's faint, struggling breath from the ICU. That's the sound of the woman you left to die under the bridge, Amara said softly. You left her because you thought she was finished. But she's not. She woke up. She knows your face, Bode. And she knows everything Patience did. The sound of his victim's voice, combined with the shock of her survival, broke Bode. He looked from Amara's unwavering moral certainty to Johnson's lethal calm. It wasn't just Patience. Bode cried out, his fear overwhelming his greed. She has protection. A powerful man. He helped her hide the money and paid me. He knew where Madame Sandra was hiding, and he sent me to monitor her. Patience reports directly to him. Give me a name, Johnson commanded. Mr. Cole. Bode screamed. The company attorney. He's the one who signed off on the charity accounts. He was Patience's silent partner. Johnson froze. Mr. Cole, his longtime family lawyer, a trusted board member, the man who had comforted him when his mother disappeared, the man who knew every weakness and every financial lock. The betrayal was absolute. Johnson walked back to the penthouse in a dangerous silence. He ignored the security detail. He ignored the stunning view. He sat down and stared at the dark reflection of his own face in the glass wall. Mr. Cole, he murmured. He knows the layout of the hospital. He knows every loophole I can use. He was advising me on the investigation into my mother's disappearance. Amara stood beside him, placing a hand gently on the back of his chair. We need a name for the police, Johnson said, his voice flat. But we can't risk arresting him yet. If he knows we suspect him, he will erase every trace of evidence and try to silence my mother one last time. Johnson looked at Amara, a dangerous light igniting in his eyes. He needs to believe he has won. We set a final trap. The last thing Mr. Cole will expect is a trap set by the weakest people in his life. He called his personal assistant. Draft a press release. Use the largest papers. Announce that Madame Sandra had a severe relapse and did not survive the second attack. State that all investigations have been closed. But sir, the assistant protested. Do it now, Johnson snapped. He turned to Amara, a dark shadow crossing his face. We are going to give the mastermind a window. He needs to celebrate his victory. He needs to visit his victim to confirm she is silent forever. And you, Amara, are going to be my eyes and ears inside the hospital when he does. Amara nodded without hesitation. The battle was no longer about saving a stranger, it was about bringing a vicious predator to justice. She was ready. A sterile, quiet room that is secretly rigged for security. The hospital was quiet. The press had reported the false news of Madame Sandra's death. The halls near her room were empty, guarded only by a single uniformed security officer, Johnson's chief. Inside the room, the oxygen tube hummed softly, and the monitors maintained a slow, peaceful rhythm. Madame Sandra was sleeping soundly, unaware of the trap set around her. Amara was sitting in a chair near the window, pretending to read a school brochure. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her face was serene. She was the bait. A few minutes later, the door opened silently. Mr. Cole, a middle-aged man, expensive, tailored suit, confident, smug expression, Johnson's trusted family lawyer and the hidden mastermind, walked in. He carried a small bouquet of white lilies, the traditional flower of mourning. Mr. Cole dismissed the security guard with a curt wave. I'm here to offer my condolences to the late Madame Sandra, he murmured, his voice oily with false grief. The chief wanted a final moment with his mother. He closed the door and immediately dropped the flowers into the nearest trash can. The mask was off. Mr. Cole approached the bed, his face twisted in a cold smile of satisfaction. He leaned over the frail woman. Did you really think your son's money could stop me, Sandra? He whispered, his voice dangerously low. You and your morality always stood in the way of my plans. That charity money was mine. I controlled the company's secrets, not Johnson. He reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a small, unmarked syringe. He carefully checked the monitor, ensuring the dose would appear to be a final, quiet relapse. Rest now, old friend, Mr. Cole sneered. Just as his hand moved toward the 4-line, Amara spoke, her voice clear and steady. Don't touch her. Mr. Cole spun around, startled. He hadn't noticed the girl in the corner. He composed himself quickly, a condescending look spreading across his face. Who are you? A hospital helper? Leave now, child. This is a private family moment. It is, Amara agreed, standing up slowly. And family moments are about truth. I know who you are, Mr. Cole. The man who comforted Johnson while plotting to kill his mother. The man who employed Bode to leave her for dead under the bridge. Mr. Cole laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. You've been watching too many movies. You're talking nonsense. Now, get out before I have security remove you. Suddenly, the lights in the room clicked off. The door burst open, and Johnson strode in, flanked by 3 security men. The chief guard, whom Mr. Cole thought he had dismissed, was right behind them. Johnson's voice was lethal, cold. Security won't remove her, Cole. But they will certainly remove you. Mr. Cole froze, the syringe dropping to the floor and rolling under the bed. The look on his face shifted from shock to pure, trapped fury. Johnson. I was checking her line. I came to pray. Who is this girl? She's clearly delusional. Johnson didn't look at the syringe. He looked at Amara. She is the one person you and patients refused to see, Cole. The person you stepped over on the sidewalk. She is the witness who saw your lookout, remembered the dent in his car, and listened to every word you just said. Johnson stepped closer to his former trusted advisor. You thought my weakness was my love for my mother. You were right, but you failed to see my strength. My strength is the grace of the people you ignore. It's over, Cole. The police are waiting outside. And every word of your confession has just been broadcast to the hospital security hub. Mr. Cole's face collapsed into a mask of pure defeat. He was quickly restrained and led away, his pleas and protests echoing down the quiet corridor. Amara stood in silence, her body trembling now that the danger had passed. Johnson walked over to her. He looked down at the brochure she still held. "Is that the medical school you wanted to attend?" Amara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "It was a dream, sir. But it's too expensive." Johnson smiled, a deep, genuine expression of gratitude and warmth. He looked toward his sleeping mother, whose life Amara had saved twice. "Amara, you chose kindness when everyone else chose convenience. You chose sacrifice when everyone else chose to ignore. You proved that grace is more powerful than greed." Johnson took her hands gently. "You saved my mother. You saved my life. And you exposed the corruption that threatened my company." He looked at her, his voice firm with absolute certainty. "That medical school is no longer a dream. It is a fact. Effective today, the Johnson OA Foundation will cover every single expense: tuition, accommodation, books, and a living stipend for the full duration of your medical degree." Amara gasped, her eyes wide with overwhelming emotion. "Sir, I can't accept that much." "You already earned it," Johnson insisted. "You taught me that the person who seems to have nothing to give is often the one who gives the most." A few weeks later, Madame Sandra was released from the hospital, healthy and strong. Her first stop was to visit Amara in her small new student apartment, bringing a plate of her famous hot yam and palm oil. Johnson stood watching the two women laugh, the billionaire and the future doctor, both united by a simple act of human kindness. The woman he loved, his mother, was safe, and the woman who saved her, Amara, was on her path to greatness. He looked over the city, now seeing it not as a source of money, but as a place filled with hidden heroes, people whose true value was only revealed when they were tested by the suffering of others. The final lesson was complete.